The boy's wet hand opens slowly, like a flower that has been waiting all its life for this exact moment of light. Inside the mussel shell, pale and round and luminous as a captured moon, sits something that has no business being there. Maron leans over his shoulder. Neither child breathes. Downstream, Celeste is already watching. 3 weeks earlier, Etienne Boudreau is standing knee-deep in clear Bayou water, at the hour when the surface turns to hammered copper, and his granddaughter is asking him why they bother with mussels when the Thibodeau family sells catfish by the wagon load and makes twice what they do. Etienne is quiet for a long moment. Catfish, he finally says, you gotta chase. Mussels, you got to know. He does not say anything else. The bayou they call Claire runs shallow and unusually clear along the eastern edge of the Boudreau property, where the silt has settled over centuries into a fine, pale bed that catches the light differently than ordinary bayou mud. Etienne discovered this stretch before Luc and Morin were born, when he was still a younger man with sharper knees, and what he found was not treasure, but possibility. The particular combination of clean current, warm shallows, and sandy bottom that freshwater mussels prefer above almost anything else. He built the garden over 6 years. Simple wooden frames, salvaged lumber from a collapsed boat shed 2 miles upriver, notched and fitted together without nails where nails weren't necessary. The baskets are woven river cane, lined with silt from the deep bend where the fine sediment accumulates, and arranged in rows across a 20-foot stretch of bed that Etienne has learned the way another man might learn a piece of music, by feel, by repetition, by understanding what each part asks of the whole. The cabin sits on its raised pilings at the edge of all of this, weathered gray-brown, its porch facing the water. Celeste keeps dried herbs hung from the rafters of that porch. Sassafras, bay laurel, dried peppers on a string. And in the evenings, the smell of whatever is cooking over the outdoor fire drifts across the dock and out over the bayou until it mingles with the smell of the water itself, which is green and mineral and alive. Luc is 11 and already taking the work seriously in the way that oldest children do, with a kind of concentrated pride that Etienne recognizes from his own boyhood. Morin is 8 and still moves through the world as though it is mostly made of wonderful things she hasn't examined yet, which Etienne considers the more accurate view. They spend their mornings in the water. They spend their afternoons sorting and cleaning. They spend their evenings eating whatever Celeste has made from the best of the day's harvest, and they do not talk about money at the dinner table because Etienne considers that a poor use of a meal. It is Morin who finds the first one. She is not looking for anything unusual. She is sorting through the morning's harvest on the dock, the way Etienne taught her. Tap the shell, smell the shell, set aside anything that feels too light. When her thumbnail catches on something inside a half-open mussel that doesn't feel like mussel, she pries the shell wider. It sits in the soft tissue like a small, finished thought, perfectly round, the color of the inside of a cloud. Morin holds it up to the light without saying anything. The sun comes through it and comes back out changed. "Pépère," she calls, not loudly, the way she would call him for an ordinary thing. Etienne wades over. He looks at what she is holding. He does not move for a moment. He takes it from her carefully, rolls it between his thumb and forefinger, holds it up the way she did. Then he looks at the shell it came from, at the bed it came from, at the 20-foot stretch of water that has been, until this moment, simply the garden. "Is it a pearl?" Morin asks. "It is," he says. Luc has come up from the water by then, standing on the dock steps with his shirt wet to the chest. He sees what Etienne is holding, His eyes go to his grandfather's face rather than to the pearl, which is the right instinct, and what he sees there is not excitement, but something more complicated, a careful, slow-moving thought that Etienne is having in real time. That evening, after the children are settled, Etienne sits with Celeste on the porch. He sets the pearl on the railing between them. It is small, but unmistakable in the dying light, luminous in a way that seems almost unreasonable given where it came from. Celeste picks it up, holds it, sets it back down. "How many beds?" she asks. 12 rows, maybe 200 shells per row. She does not say anything right away. Celeste has always been the one who thinks the full distance of a thing before she speaks. And Etienne has always been grateful for this quality in a partner, even when it requires patience. "If there are more," she says finally, "we don't tell anyone yet." This is what Etienne has been thinking too, and the fact that she arrived at it independently, without any of his prompting, settles something in him. He nods. The debate that follows is not loud. It is the kind of debate that happens mostly in pauses. What do they owe the children, in terms of honesty? What do they owe themselves, in terms of caution? The pearl could be singular. The pearl could be the beginning of something that changes the particular balance of their life, which has been hard in the way that most lives are hard and also quietly good in a way that not all lives manage to be. They sit until the stars come out. The pearl sits on the railing. The bayou makes its patient sound in the dark below. The next morning, Etienne wakes before light and is already in the water when the sky turns gray. He works through the rows methodically, the way he has always worked, but with a different quality of attention now. Not urgency, not greed, but the particular focus of a man who suspects he has been tending something larger than he knew. By the time Celeste comes to the porch with the first coffee, and the children come barefoot down the dock steps, still half asleep and blinking, Etienne has opened 40 shells. He has found 3 more pearls. He cups them in his palm and says nothing until Luc and Marin reach the water's edge. What changes that morning is not the work. The work stays the same. The lifting, the sorting, the placement, the patience. What changes is what Celeste begins to see. She watches Etienne show the children the 4 pearls arranged in his palm, watches Luc go immediately serious and Marin immediately joyful, watches her husband's face as he looks at both grandchildren looking at the water. She goes back inside and brings out her good tin box, the one from her mother, and sets it open on the dock without a word. The system they develop over the following 2 weeks is Etienne's invention, though Luc refines it in ways that Etienne acknowledges with the quiet satisfaction of a teacher watching a student surpass a lesson. Each morning, before the sun has fully cleared the cypress, they work the rows in a pattern. Etienne starting from the upstream end, Luc working the middle section, Marine assigned to the downstream rows where the shells are youngest and least likely to yield. This is not meant to exclude her from the discovery. It is meant to teach her the patience that pearl cultivation actually requires, which is the patience of someone who tends a thing without expectation of reward on any particular day. Marin understands this in the way children understand things when they are told plainly and without condescension. She tends her rows with the same attentiveness she brings to everything, which is considerable. She has a habit of talking to the Mussels, quietly, in the Cajun French she has learned mostly from Etienne and Celeste's conversations, and while Luc finds this slightly embarrassing, Etienne finds it entirely reasonable. The Mussels have been listening to the Bayou for years. They can certainly stand a little conversation. The pearl checking protocol is Luc's contribution. Rather than opening every shell, which would damage the garden, kill the crop, waste what they've spent years building. Luke proposes a careful rotation. Open only the shells that have reached full maturity. Mark each checked shell with a notch on the frame beside it. Keep a count. He brings this idea to Etienne on the third day, holding a small piece of river cane he's been using to mark, and Etienne looks at it for a long moment, and then says, "Go ahead." They find pearls on irregular days, in unpredictable locations, in quantities that range from 1 to 4 per session. Some are perfectly round, some are off-round, slightly flattened, the color of old cream. All of them go into Celeste's tin box, which has begun to feel heavier in a way that is both literal and not. Celeste watches from the dock or from the porch, and she develops her own habit. Each morning before coming to the water, she writes something small in the back pages of the household ledger. Not inventory in any formal sense, more like witness. She writes the date, the weather, how the water looks, and how many they found. She does not know yet why she is keeping this record, only that it feels necessary. The bayou in those weeks is extraordinarily beautiful in the particular way that places become beautiful when you begin to pay them a different quality of attention. The water is the color that very clear, shallow water turns in full sun. Not blue, not green, but something between the two that has no name in English, though it has one in the Cajun French Etienne grew up with, a word his grandmother used that means approximately the color water is when it is happy. Shafts of morning light drive straight down through it to the sandy bed, illuminating the mussel rows, the wooden frames, the slow drift of current over everything. Luke begins to notice things he had not noticed before. The way certain sections of the bed seem to hold the light longer than others. The way the mussels in the clearest water are consistently larger. The slight variation in shell color that correlates, he begins to suspect, with something about the particular sediment in each area. He starts asking Etienne questions that are increasingly specific, and Etienne answers all of them without impatience, and some of them with visible pleasure. Marin, for her part, finds 2 pearls in a single shell one morning, which has not happened before. She holds the shell up and calls out across the water, and the sound of her voice carries through the cypress and off the surface of the bayou and back again, and Etienne hears it and smiles before he has even turned around to look. By the end of the second week, Celeste's tin box holds 26 pearls. On a Thursday toward the end of that second week, a pirogue comes up the bayou, carrying a man named Fontenot, not anyone they know well, a trader from Bro Bridge who comes through occasionally with salt pork and machine-threaded rope, goods they cannot make themselves and cannot always afford. He ties up at the dock, and Celeste comes down to see what he has. The transaction is ordinary, a small amount of salt, a spool of waxed cord, but Fontenot lingers in the way that traders do, looking at everything, at cataloging without appearing to catalog, his eyes going to the water and the frames visible beneath it. "Still working those beds?" he asks. "Always," Celeste says. "Good mussels this year?" "Fair." He looks at the water a moment longer than necessary, and then he is back to smiling and talking about the weather upriver and the price of cotton in Lafayette. And when he pulls away, Celeste watches him go until the pirogue disappears around the bend. That evening, she tells Etienne, without drama, without alarm, simply as information. Fontenot was looking at the beds. Etienne nods. He has been thinking about this, not Fontenot specifically, but the general fact that the bayou is not private in the way a field is private. Anyone with a boat can see the water. Anyone with experience can recognize a cultivated bed. And anyone who sees a family spending an unusual amount of time bent over their harvest checking shells one by one with a kind of focused attention, might begin to wonder what they are checking for. They are not doing anything wrong. The beds are on their land, or the water adjacent to it, which in Louisiana Bayou country is a legal matter of some complexity that Etienne has never had occasion to investigate, but is now beginning to consider. There is no law against finding pearls. There is no law against keeping them. But there are always people who believe that found value is shared value. And Etienne has lived long enough to know that the moment other people learn about something good, the nature of that good thing begins to change. So the discipline intensifies, quietly, without becoming fear. They check the shells in the early morning now, before the light is full, before anyone passing on the water would have clear sight of what their hands are doing. They keep their conversations about the pearls inside the cabin. Etienne tells the children, plainly without making it frightening, that the pearls are theirs, that they came from their work and their water and their patience, and that for now they are going to keep them private, the way you keep any good and fragile thing private until you understand its full shape. Luke receives this instruction with the gravity it deserves. He has his grandfather's instinct for understanding that some things need protecting before they need sharing. Marin asks if she can tell the Mussels. Etienne says he supposes that's between her and them. The work itself deepens in those days, in a way that is hard to describe, except to say that all four of them are now doing it with a different quality of presence. Etienne watches the children in the water and sees something in them he had hoped for, but had not been certain of. A seriousness that is not heaviness, a care that comes from valuing the work itself and not only what the work might yield. Luke moves through the rows with increasing confidence and decreasing noise, the way good workmen do. Marin, even Marin with her talking to the Mussels and her occasional bursts of excitement about a particularly beautiful shell, has learned to save her joy for the dock, to be still in the water. By the end of that third week, Celeste's tin box holds 41 pearls. She opens it one evening after supper and counts them again in the lamplight. And Etienne watches her face, and she looks up and says, "We need to know what they're worth." Etienne takes one pearl, one chosen from the middle of the collection, neither the best nor the worst, wrapped in a piece of cloth, and travels by pirogue to Bro Bridge, which takes most of a long day. He does not go to Fontenot. He goes to the jeweler on the main street, a careful old man named Arsenault, who has been working with pearl and gold for 40 years, and who looks at the single pearl for a long time before he looks up. He names a price. Etienne keeps his face still. He thanks Arsenault, puts the pearl back in his pocket, and poles home. That evening, he tells Celeste the number. Celeste sits with the number for 3 days. She does not share it with the children. Not yet. Not because she is hiding anything from them, but because she wants to understand its full weight before she passes it to anyone else. She moves through those 3 days, cooking and watching the water, and occasionally standing on the porch in the early morning with her coffee, looking at the bayou the way she looks at something she is trying to memorize. On the 4th day, a man arrives. He comes in a flatboat, not a pirogue, which means he is not local, or at least is not traveling light. He is younger than Etienne, perhaps 40, with the particular way of moving that belongs to men who are accustomed to being the ones who arrive at other people's situations and define them. He introduces himself as Desormeaux, says he is a land agent working out of New Orleans, says he has been conducting a survey of property holdings along this stretch of bayou on behalf of interests he describes vaguely as commercial. He is polite. He is very polite in the specific way that makes Etienne's shoulders sit slightly higher than usual. Desormeaux has paperwork. He shows Etienne a survey map on which the property boundaries are drawn in a way that Etienne does not recognize. The water line is placed differently than Etienne has always understood it, set back from the bayou's edge by a measurement that would, if accurate, put the mussel beds in water that belongs not to the Boudreau property, but to a navigable waterway corridor held by the state. Etienne asks to see the map more carefully. Desormeaux allows this. The lines are not Etienne's lines, but the map has an official appearance, stamps, measurements, the name of a surveying office in Lafayette, and Etienne has not spent his life dealing in official documents. He is 66 years old and has known this water for 30 years, and he has never doubted where his land ends and the bayou begins. But doubt is a thing that official-looking paper can create in a man, even when his instincts are correct. Desormeaux says he is not there to cause trouble. He says the interests he represents might be willing to come to an arrangement regarding the water access, and he pauses carefully here, any productivity associated with those waters. Etienne says he appreciates the visit. He says he will need time to think. Desormeaux leaves his card, a printed card, another official-seeming thing, and poles back downstream with the flatboat's easy indifference. And that evening Etienne spreads the copy of the survey map that Desormeaux left on the kitchen table, and he and Celeste look at it together without speaking for a long time. Luc comes and looks too, because Luc is 11 and can read the shape of an adult situation as well as any child who has been paying attention, which he has been. He looks at the lines on the map and looks at his grandfather and says, "That's not right." "No," Etienne says, "I don't believe it is." "But you don't know for certain." "Not yet." Celeste folds the map with a decisiveness that means she has already begun thinking about what comes next. She sets it on the shelf, not in the trash, not in a prominent place. On the shelf, where a problem lives, while you are assembling your answer to it. She brings Luc a cup of warm milk and tells him the beds are fine, and that the water has not changed, and that they will work it out, which is how she has always handled the distance between a difficulty and its resolution. Etienne does not sleep well for several nights, which Celeste knows because she does not sleep well either, and they have been in the same bed for 41 years, and know each other's wakefulness the way they know each other's breathing. He spends those nights thinking not in catastrophe, but in practical sequence, which is the mode of thinking that has always served him best. What do they actually know? What do they not know? What can be found out, and how? What he knows. He has worked these beds for 6 years. He built every frame, placed every basket, seeded every row. He has paid taxes on this property every year without exception, and the tax records will reflect the boundaries as he has always understood them. What he does not know. Whether those boundaries, as he has always understood them, are the boundaries as the state of Louisiana would adjudicate them. The thought that has been troubling him most is this: the pearls, which are the thing worth protecting, are inseparable from the beds, which are the thing in question. You cannot move a mussel garden. You cannot relocate 6 years of cultivation. The beds are what they are and where they are. And if the water they sit in is not his water, then the work of 6 years and the 41 pearls in Celeste's tin box and whatever follows them exists on uncertain ground. He rises before light on the 4th morning and goes to the dock alone. The bayou is dark and perfectly still at that hour. The cypress just shapes against the sky. He crouches at the dock's edge and puts his hand in the water. which is warmer than the air, and he holds it there. He thinks about his father, who worked a different stretch of water 40 years ago, and was told by different men with different paperwork that he had less claim to it than he believed. He thinks about how that ended and how it did not end, and what his father taught him in the space between those two things. Then he thinks about Arsenault, the jeweler, who has been in Breau Bridge for 40 years, and who has seen things come and go along this bayou, and who mentioned, when Etienne visited, the name of a lawyer in town, not unsolicited, casually, as one craftsman might mention another, a man named Trosclair, who had handled property matters in the parish for 30 years. Etienne has been treating this mention as optional information. He now decides it is not optional. When Celeste comes to the porch with the morning coffee, he is standing at the dock railing with his mind made up, which she can see from the porch before she even reaches him. "You're going to Breau Bridge," she says. "Monday," he says. She nods. She hands him his coffee. He goes inside and begins working on what he will need to bring: the tax records from the cedar chest, the original deed his father had registered, the sketch he drew himself when he built the first frames and noted the distances from the bank in his own handwriting in the household ledger. Celeste follows him in and goes to the shelf where she put the map and takes it down and adds it to the pile without being asked. Luke, coming down the stairs in the morning, sees the documents on the table and the expression on his grandparents' faces and asks simply, "Is there anything I can do?" Etienne looks at him. "Tend the beds," he says, "same as every morning." Luke goes and wakes Marin. Trosclair reviews everything Etienne has brought. He is a careful man, slow-spoken, with the particular patience of someone who has seen a great many documents and a great many claims, and knows that most situations resolve not in drama, but in paper. He reads the deed. He reads the survey. He looks at Etienne's own sketch with its handwritten measurements. Then he puts everything down on his desk and folds his hands. He says that the deed language is old and imprecise in the way that old deeds often are, and that Desormeaux's map, while not necessarily legitimate, raises a question that would require the court to answer. He says this could take time. Etienne pulls home slowly, taking the long way without meaning to, and arrives at the dock in the late afternoon to find the children in the water doing exactly what he told them to do. He watches them from the pirogue for a moment before they notice him. Luke is moving through the upstream rows with his careful notched cane, methodical and unhurried. Marin is at her downstream section, leaning over a shell, talking to it in her low, companionable way. The light is coming through the water the way it always does at this hour, turning the bayou bed to hammered gold, and the wooden frames and woven baskets are visible below the surface in perfect order, undisturbed, tended. The work is still the work. The water is still the water. He thinks about what Trosclair said about time. He has lived 66 years and has a particular relationship with time, not comfortable, exactly, but honest. Time has taken things from him. Time has also given him things he did not expect and could not have planned for, and most of those things are visible right now in 20 feet of clear bayou water, pulling mussels up with wet hands. He ties the pirogue and sits on the dock for a long while before going inside to tell Celeste what Trosclair said. She listens. She nods. She says, "Then we will be patient." It is Luke who finds the answer, though he does not know at first that it is the answer. He has been studying Etienne's old sketch, the handwritten one with the measurements from the bank, and he has been comparing it to the original deed language with the focused interest of a boy who has learned to read careful information carefully. He comes to the kitchen table on a Sunday morning and sets both documents side by side and points to something. Pépère, he says, look at this word. The word is arpent. Etienne leans over the table. Luc points to the deed, which describes the property boundary in an old French measurement, arpents from the surveyor's mark, and then points to Desormeaux's map, which has converted that measurement to feet using a standard conversion. The conversion is wrong, Luc says. An arpent isn't exactly that many feet. It depends on which arpent. The old Louisiana arpent is longer. Etienne stares at the page. He knows this. He has always known this. The way you know things that are part of the air you grew up breathing. His father measured land in arpents. His grandfather measured land in arpents. And the old Louisiana linear arpent that was used in French land grants in this parish is 191 feet and 81 hundredths, not the shorter measurement that Desormeaux's map has used. The difference, across the full width of the property, moves the boundary line by more than 12 feet. 12 feet places the mussel beds comfortably, unambiguously, inside the Boudreau property. Etienne straightens up slowly. He looks at Luc, who is watching him with the contained pride of a boy who does not want to seem proud. How did you know about the arpent? Etienne asks. You told me, Luc says. When you were teaching me how you measured the frames, you said your father measured in the old way, and you kept his numbers. Etienne turns to Celeste, who has been standing in the kitchen doorway throughout this exchange with a dish towel over her shoulder, perfectly still. She crosses the room, looks at both documents, looks at Etienne. Write it down, she says. Everything Luc just said. Write it exactly. They spend that Sunday at the kitchen table. Etienne writes in his careful, slanted hand. Luc sits beside him, rechecking the numbers, asking questions about the original deed language until he understands every word of it. Marin brings them water and then sits on the floor beside the table with a mussel shell she is polishing with a cloth, and listening to everything, asking occasional questions of her own that are less about the legal argument and more about the fundamental unfairness of someone telling you that your garden isn't yours, which is also a question worth asking. Celeste makes supper. She makes the good kind, a long-cooked pot of sauce piquante with the mussels she'd been saving, rice from the good rice, the French bread she saves for occasions. She sets the table as though they are celebrating something, which they are, or at least the approach of something. The following Monday, Etienne returns to Brobridge with Luc's analysis written in his own hand, with the deed, with the sketch, and with a clear argument about the arpent conversion that Trosclair reads twice, and then sets down with an expression that is as close to pleased as a careful man allows himself. This is correct, Trosclair says. He writes a letter on his office letterhead, addressed to the interests Desormeaux represents, with the full calculation included and the relevant precedent noted, and he gives Etienne a copy. 2 weeks pass, then a third. On a Thursday morning, a letter arrives from a legal office in New Orleans. Celeste reads it first, as she always reads correspondence first, because she reads faster. She holds it for a moment, then brings it to Etienne on the dock where he is adjusting a basket frame that has shifted in the current. He reads it standing in ankle-deep water. The claim is withdrawn. Desormeaux's survey is acknowledged to contain a conversion error. No further interest is asserted in the Boudreau water access. Etienne stands in the water for a long moment. Then he wades to the dock, climbs up, and calls the children. He reads them the letter. Luc's face goes through several things in rapid succession. Relief, then a kind of delayed understanding of how serious it had been. then a quiet pride that is really the pride of someone who helped. Marin listens to all of it and then says, "So the Mussels are still ours?" "The Mussels," Etienne says, "are still ours." She nods, satisfied, as though this was the main point all along, which perhaps it was. That afternoon they work the beds the way they always do, except that Etienne works more slowly than usual, and with what Celeste, watching from the porch, I can only describe as a quality of gratitude that is too large to show directly, and so comes out in the care he takes with each frame, each basket, each shell lifted and examined and returned. The following Saturday, Etienne goes to Arsenault and Bro Bridge with Celeste beside him, and the tin box between them, and they sell the pearls. Not all of them, 28 of the 41, chosen carefully, the ones that are finest and most regular. Arsenault examines each one, asks about the provenance, listens to what little Etienne tells him with the respectful attention of a craftsman hearing about another craftsman's work. The money is enough to repair the cabin roof properly, replace the oldest frame sections in the beds, buy the good materials Etienne has been making do without for years, and set aside a sum in the cedar chest that represents not wealth, but margin, space between the family and misfortune, the thing that Patience had been working toward without anyone giving it that name. On the way home, Celeste holds the cedar chest between her feet in the pirogue, and Etienne pulls, and neither of them speaks for a long time. Finally, she says, 12 feet. He almost laughs. 12 feet. She shakes her head, not at the smallness of it, but at the specific miracle of a thing being exactly as it needed to be. On the last warm evening of that season, the four of them are on the dock as the light fails, Etienne and Celeste in their chairs, Luc sitting at the dock's edge with his feet over the water, Marin lying on her stomach, looking down through the surface at the mussel beds below, which are visible in the last of the light. She reaches into her pocket and produces a single pearl she has been saving, small, slightly off-round, the color of early morning. She holds it over the water for a moment, looking at it. Then she puts it back in her pocket and keeps looking at the beds.